Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the break. So now for our next session, you can have the most brilliant plan, but without internal buy-in, it's really just an idea, right? Sometimes implementing and getting finance, operations, and the rest of the organization on board is one of the most challenging parts of implementing a strategy. So today we have also a very special guest, and thank you again for getting on the stage for us, Laurent. Laurent will share with us a real-world case study from Merck, while Dina also frames or creates a framework around it to show us how to build governance, how to achieve stakeholder alignment and engagement, and how to create realistic budgets. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Laurent Villiers, Associate Director of Service and Energy's Global Procurement at Merck Group, and Dina Caramarco, Lead Partner at E&C.
Hello. Good morning,
Thank you,
everybody.
David. Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again. So we have a very long title. Let's not have you read it, but already get started. And we'll start with value. So for me personally, energy procurement is about creating value, right? And positioning yourself as a strategic partner in your organizations rather than operational or tactical one. But a value is a concept that we should further define. And the first definition is, for whom do you create value? So we can take a look at the left side and follow the Friedman organizational theory and say that the aim of the organization is to maximize profits, right? The more you earn, the better you score. But actually, there is an alternative to that, and that is we need to take a look at all the voices of those that actually have a stake in an organization. So today we will break down what energy procurement is, why it fails, how it fails, but also we will take a look at some assumptions, some challenges that we have ongoing, which I'm sure a lot of you will relate. And as David said, we will have a real case study where we will show how clarity or the lack of it made all the difference when it comes to energy governance. So first, let's take the box on the theory. So what is energy governance? Well, in essence, it's about distributions of rights, responsibilities. In other words, who gets to decide. On the other side, we have a lot of different participants, but ultimately, we want to know who is the one that can make the decision at the end. So if we take a look at different aspects of governance, it's not about buying electrons, but it's actually about redistribution of power. If we only focus on governance, then listens to those that have power, then your governance, it's all about control. But actually, if you lack engagement in your governments, then your governance becomes a very rigid bureaucracy. What we want is strong governance and leadership that actually takes into account both responsibility as well as accountability. There is an alignment with internal goals, and there is also transparency. So what we need is to take into account all different aspects, because at the end of the day, that will be the testament of, does your organization work when it comes to governance, or does it fail? Now, if we take a look at energy procurement, it's not about buying electrons, right? It's not about ticking the boxes, but it is also about the stakeholders that you have. So if we want to see how we engage stakeholders, how we align, obviously we need to first map the stakeholders. On the right side, you will see some direct stakeholders, which are actually people from internal departments, suppliers, employees, and business partners. So they have an influence on your decision making, whereas the indirect ones are those that are actually affected by your procurement decisions. So that can be everything from end consumers, broader market, as well as future generations.
So who are the real owners of that finally?
It is indeed difficult, but a difficult question. But if you take a look at various stakeholders, I would say that it's all about having your cross-functional team, just like we have identified in the previous session, but also knowing what are the categories, what are the elements that we're talking about when it comes to ownership. So on the ownership side, obviously you have energy procurement strategy in the middle, then you have your cost, volume, and carbon. Now, if everything is everyone's responsibility, basically nothing is owned. And if there is no ownership, then everything becomes a political game. So instead of focusing your strategy, you are just looking at each other and passing the ball from one department to another. Now, with the quick show of hands, I would like you to use the cards once again. So the blue one is a representative of, do you actually own the cost category in your organization? Whereas the volume, we can take the yellow one, and then if you also own the carbon category in your organization, you can just put all three cards up. So let's see who owns what in your organizations.
Interesting. Wow.
Okay. This is actually much better than we expected,
Good.
I have to say. I see a lot of people with all three cards in the air, which basically means that your internal incentives are aligned, right? When it comes to procurement strategy and how you implement it, it's not about intentions, it is about incentives that you have. And when you have an alignment on incentives within departments, but also within categories, then you can say that you're a winning organization.
So what do we have to focus on, finally?
Exactly. So unlike a common opinion, organizations do not fail if they are centralized or decentralized, right? You can have your, personal preference for one or the other, but actually organizations fail because of blurred accountability. If you don't know who makes the decision, who benefits, and who takes the risks, that means that the accountability is simply blurred and you're heading for a disaster. So when it comes to being centralized or decentralized, it's all about knowing who owns what when it comes to your decision-making process. And obviously the first, let's say, engagement or first element when we step into a collaboration with the client where we can test how strong your governance is actually with the onboarding process, right? So this is the first stress test.
Could be.
As we have identified it before. So when we get the question, how long will the onboarding process last? Obviously your first reaction is, okay, stay professional, be very kind, but the only honest answer that we can give to you is it depends, right? It depends how you are structured, it depends who owns what, how is your data management set up, and of course, are you ready actually to get onboarded when it comes to both your contracts, your hedges, your invoices, and everything that matters when it comes to setting up your data management and procurement strategy. So if we take a look at other elements, the one where we see a lot of struggle is obviously data management, right? It's a black box. If you don't own it, everyone knows that it's very important to have a good grip and control over your data management. But very often you are in contact with stakeholders within your organizations. They just see the upper part of the iceberg, right? They don't know what goes on actually in, let's say, below the sea level. And there are so many layers that we need to take into account. So whether you are a robust organization with very strong governance processes, but also robust data management will tell not on the upper part, this is just the outcome of what you're doing, but actually on the setup of your data management. So the moment that we start onboarding a client, we actually start building your data management system, right? Because on this rests all the rest. So we have data warehouse set up, we have client input where we really go to the last connection point to the meter data to set up your contracts, but also to set you up for hedging. And on obviously data warehouse where it's super important to have a grip on wholesale market data and simulated data. So these are basically the ingredients of a data management setup that works and that will not fail. The moment the energy crisis hit, you get a question from your C-level, all in panic, asking what's going on. So what's going on will not be answered by the newspaper articles, but what's going on is the part that you will actually cover from the lower one. So if everything is set up correctly, that actually creates a momentum for data integration as well as storytelling, right? So the dashboards, they're just a way, a mean of how you can communicate what is going on below the surface, and actually they will give you the control over the narrative, right? It's not important to bore your colleagues, your departments with all the details, with the complexity. You own the narrative. You give them what they need to know, and you cut through the noise. Not every energy crisis, not every ship that doesn't make it to the Strait of Hormuz is changing the energy fundamentals, and not everything is relevant or equally relevant for each organization. So the next time when someone asks you a question of, okay, what's in it for us? What is data management? Well, actually, data management is really at the core of everything. If you don't get this right, then sooner or later you are heading for a disaster.
So once you get your data, and if possible with some accuracy, you need to get into your strategy, your procurement strategy.
Exactly. So this, for me personally, it's my favorite part, because if it goes wrong at the core, and that is when we are setting up a strategy. So here we have different scenarios, different options that can play. So it could be because you had bad experience in the past that your C-level tries to micromanage everything and they think this is the best solution forward. It could be that there is absolutely no alignment between cross-functional teams and everyone is running in different directions. It could also be that someone somewhere is signing PPAs that are affecting your energy procurement volumes and your price, but you're completely unaware of that. It could also be that you have colleagues who have different incentives. Some that say, yeah, theoretically and statistically looking, spot is always cheaper than forward. Why don't we just go for the spot? But actually here, you fail big time if you don't make the link between the impact energy price volatility has on your P&L and on the fact whether you can actually pass through your energy cost variations to your end consumers. So just like we were talking already during the previous session, this is really where you either win or lose. And very important, don't set up energy procurement strategy just with your consultant. Make sure that you invite other stakeholders within your organization. Super important, sales. Don't cut them out. They might be annoying, they might be the kings of the game, but they do have a very valuable input for you. The same thing goes with finance, goes with treasury, but also sustainability. So everyone needs to be aligned and sync before we can move forward.
Then you need to think about risk management for sure. And I wanted to add that even if it's not natural getting to your sales department, at the start it will be weird, but then slowly and surely you will get more insight from them and you will create a relation which could be really important.
Yeah, and educating your stakeholders is also another element that is very important, especially if in the past everything was scattered, there was no one really owning the energy procurement strategy. Well, it is your task to actually say to your stakeholders and convince them that energy management is not about forecasting, it's not about predicting what will be the price, right? So, and the first test of how well your governance is set up, but also does your strategy respond to the volatility of the market will be this. So in case we have an energy crisis, that would really be the moment where your governance model as well as your strategy will either pass, or fail the test. And just so we are clear, there are different layers of how wrong can you be here. First one, obviously, if you don't have strategy at all, right? I will not embarrass anyone now and ask who doesn't have a strategy. Let's assume that you all do. But the question is, do you have an optimal strategy in place? And are you actually deploying this strategy and making sure that you move away from gut feeling, from my CEO thinks this or that, or I read something in news, to really going back to that strategy framework and using risk management as its safeguard. And then the third layer is the accountability matrix clear enough in your strategy so it really passes the next test? And on that accountability, you obviously need to know when do you hedge, what is, let's say, the driver behind that, how much, how long, and also, not to forget, who does it, right? So if everyone is running in all different directions, it could be that you end up over-hedged, under-hedged, or not hedged at all.
If I may add, I would like to share that this kind of strategy or the way that it goes needs to be properly understood by all your stakeholders. And the main failure is that when they consider that you are doing on your own something that they cannot access, and you need to explain with very simple explanation so that you are getting their attention and they are relying on you. And then we will see that later. They can also rely on you when they get a proper budget, and I'll let you go.
Yeah, exactly. But actually an important one, and you have reminded me, Laurent, is to say that risk management doesn't start with hedging. It starts with setting up your contracts on time, making sure that you have a good contract that can be used as a tool to implement your strategy, making sure that you have enough flexibility, but also that you have a full energy portfolio landscape in mind, so you know which type of contract actually fits what you want to achieve with hedging. Another interesting one is budgeting. What's to it, right? You take the cost of last year, you apply some indexation, and there you go. You want to make sure that you continuously risk manage the strategy before the final budget is due, but how much damage can you actually do in those couple of months in between? Well, actually, it's not that straightforward. So if you really want to properly do a budget and test how resilient is it to any energy crisis, be it prices going up or down, not only that you need to take the volume snapshot of both your energy contract, but also your PPA contract, maybe even battery or any other storage solution that you have in place, because all of those elements will ultimately determine what is your final price, right? So instead of just going for an indexation of whatever your cost was for last year, break it down to the connection point level and breaking down to every cost component that actually matters. So here it's important to say that budgeting is not only owned by energy procurement. It's an exercise in which everyone should participate, right? If you want to do it right, you get your volumes, preferably from site managers, from site level. You take into account what is expected when it comes to future expectations, and you make sure that you update your non-commodity cost as well. So when you're setting up your margin and making sure that the risk limit is there, don't take it as an assumption, take it as a commitment, because the budgeting doesn't stop when the budget is final and when it's shared out with your locals or with site manager. It's actually an ongoing process. Unless you update it every once in a while, it can be on a quarterly level, you might risk that you actually miss out on the target because your volumes might change, you might hedge more, you might unfix some volumes, but also the non-commodity part, which is not or largely not under your control, can change as well.
Additionally, there could be also some willingness from stakeholders to get I would say, updates, especially within energy crisis times. And they would like to get an update by day if you would follow their request.
Preferably by yesterday.
So that's something you need to care about. And by having a strong and reliable budget, you can always speak one voice, saying that, no, those are the data we have made last quarter. Please rely on that, and we will see next quarter what are the effects. Otherwise, it will be a never-ending story.
Exactly. And one part that the budget or any good budget exercise cannot do without are the volumes, right? So very often, most neglected part in energy procurement, but also the part where everyone is benefiting from. So it really has a ripple effect, because if you don't have a good volume control, then you will not score well when it comes to hedging, when it comes to contracting, both budgeting and reporting, and ultimately as well decarbonization. So here it's very important to have a good clarity, alignment and ownership on who delivers the volume, but also to share with those stakeholders why is it important and how does their contribution fit in the grand scheme of things. So it's not something that you add on top of their work, which is already overloaded in some cases, but you need to really make them an integral part of the contribution to energy procurement. And then ultimately, maybe you thought we will go over decarbonization, but no way. So here I want to start by an uncomfortable observation by saying that energy transition is not an energy problem. It's a capital allocation problem, and capital allocation is all about governance. So it is your task to make sure that decarbonization, energy transition goals are actually included in your strategy, and also that you align across different teams. So from C-level, from treasury, production, legal, sustainability, and then finally within your teams as well. So now that we have covered what and also who, we will go to Merck's case study and see how. And the first how will be is, Laurent, how did you actually manage to go through energy procurement transition within your organization, and also how did you make it happen that energy procurement gets the deserved spotlight within your organization?
Thank you, Dina. Yes, I will try to explain the journey we have had. But before this, I would like to ask you if anybody has a good methodology to collect forecasts easily, seamlessly, and without any issues. I'm interested to discuss with later on. It's a real issue. So I will jump into the Merck. So sorry for the colors; they could be a bit pinky. But this is the corporate colors, and then I would like to show you that I had in mind the strategy since a long time, but I didn't notice how many stakeholders I have to involve in order to perform this strategy, and it has been a discovery journey, quite interesting one, if I may say. Okay. So before I would just explain who is Merck. I will start by the three business sectors. We are dealing with the life science, filtration. The brand is Millipore, for example. Filtration devices, specific devices to get some very specific qualities of waters. Healthcare, we have biotechs as normal pharmaceutical products. And electronics, which are more dedicated to the semiconductor industries, with a kind of vertical integration on very specific features. And then within we have a worldwide coverage, as you can see there, and we are currently 62,000 employees over 65 countries. This is the quote of the company, and the idea is that we are supporting the science, and we try to be innovative and on the leading edge of the technologies. Let's focus on the energy itself. So as you can see, the portfolio is within a main volume located in Europe, knowing that in Europe we are using a lot of GHPs. That means that especially in Germany and Italy, we have to consider how to manage the change, and a reasonable change, I mean, and not swinging from day to the other to electricity, of course, because there are some competitive advantage running CHPs. Otherwise, we have got full control onto the European portfolio. We are improving the control within the US portfolio, and we onboarded recently E&C. We are still within the journey of onboarding. So within the Latin America, we have only a few sites. And then Asia Pacific is a region that we have to work on, but maybe next year. And within the renewable journey, so we have covered the biggest regions, meaning the US and Europe. The real difficulties is Asia Pacific for sure. And there are some impressive prices to get green in that area.
Just to get real, right? Not to forget.
Let's go there. So the various ways that I try to explain a bit, but I will deep dive immediately, why we have started to consider a strategy before each of the sites were buying its energy, mainly managed by maintenance or engineering teams, sometimes managed by the plant director, who was a big fan of the energy. And he was reading newspaper and calling me every week to ask me to buy additional quantities. And this is the way you have experienced it, maybe. So what I am calling the fragmented foundation, it was really a commodity that was not managed, if I may say. The best was to pay the invoices on due time and to have no supply interruption, more or less. But this was the heritage. And then we have had some issues when the COVID appears, because there was uncertainty, there was volatility, and it was a bit complex to foresee what would be the impact onto the budget. And we were in a transition where the ownership was not clear at the time. It was either the Department of Engineering, the facility manager sometimes. There was also controlling. They were managing their own forecast, but they were also managing what I'm calling a buffer for their own finance. They were enlarging the volume in order to be safe in case they need more money at the end of the year. So there was a mix of this kind of picture, which was a nightmare to manage because no one has the right figures. It was the reality. So what happens in 2021? The energy crisis, but we had an issue. I was managing the energy procurement within Europe using multiple energy sourcing partners. And when you use multiple companies, even if you send them a clear message, the message is written on the various ways. So if I was asking them to hedge or to stop hedging, you can be certain that within 1 month, they did not hedge at the same time, nor in the same way, so it was a nightmare. But on the top of that, I was not reporting properly, meaning that I didn't get the hedge positions from all the countries. And what we have discovered in the full middle of the energy crisis is that even if it was recognized as hedge, Spain was not. So it was a bit uncertain in terms of consequence, but to be very pragmatic, instead of 1 million, we had 4. And it was a good wake-up for the company, because finally we were not properly organized, we were not efficient, and this is why I decided to stop having those multiple partners, not necessarily being aligned, and I was looking for a company able to help me centralize, harmonizing, but also to be stronger within the way that we were performing the sourcing activities. So this is what I am calling the plan transformation. The purpose for me was clear since the beginning. The perfect dream was to get one dashboard, and if possible, not to develop it internally, because I had some colleagues also internally who wanted to demonstrate their capability, especially IT, in connecting all the matters, in doing the job by themselves. But to make it brief, they wanted to perform all the connections, and they rely on me to connect with the suppliers, and it was a nightmare, of course, and it does not work, but it was quite costly. because each time they need to develop a new API, they were asking for 50K and all this stuff. At the end, it was a nightmare. And finally, this kind of capability was already existing on the market because energy suppliers are doing that. And there was no need to create an additional skill within internal workforce to get something that is free on the market. And this is why I've been looking at what are the possibilities, and then most of the time there was some capability to get this kind of data aggregation because of energy procurement. And you need to be careful within the ergonomy, you need to be careful within the capabilities, of course, but you can find some tools. And then we have started to work with E&C at that time. And it was the first time ever that I was able to connect all the countries getting the same vision. The real challenge is how to connect the countries which are currently missing. That means we need to extend the way we work. And you need time. Onboarding a country is not only connecting the matters, it's also informing your stakeholders, being clear on your intent, get their trust in the way you perform, and communicate regularly. And as you know, getting to a site director explaining energy, you can take exactly the same speech the year after, you will start from scratch and you restart. So that's why you need to educate them on the way that is efficient for you. And I'm standardizing a lot. I'm using always the same presentation to give them the highlights, and with year after year, they get the confidence. They are confident on the way we do, and we are reliable on the communication we do.
On that note, maybe just a question. How did you actually engage and start speaking the same language with your C-level? Because one thing is to talk with your locals, with suppliers, but how did you make that switch to the C-level?
The switch has been done thanks to the energy crisis because they were worried about the P&L consequences. But as a result, they wanted to get safety for their own, and they didn't get so much within the challenge of the site, on the production site. So in one hand, I had the site directors asking me for the cheapest price. On the other side, I had the treasury who wanted to be safe for their budget. So there was the first connection at the time. I can tell you this is not the perfect story. They have difficulties to be aligned because they are not looking for the same objectives. But there is procurement in the middle, and you try to manage both. That's the idea. I would like to tell you that for sure, within this kind of energy crisis times, the budget-oriented we are driving is absolutely safe, and we are comfortable. But as soon as the prices are dropping, like we had first quarter, I keep having questions. So why don't we buy all volume at spot? So that's the rehearsal is at least every year on these kind of questions, but this is part of the business, to my opinion. So risk never left, for sure. we do see that, but this is the first time ever that I'm able to cross this kind of crisis with a bit more comfort, if I may say. I'm not obliged to report every week. I'm not obliged to explain to each of the stakeholders how they have to perform. I am having one voice, one story to all, and also one budget set that is being applied to all the European countries, and there is no alternative to this kind of single source. And then the next steps are within APAC, and then why not having some global coverage in the future. So I need to accelerate. The idea is that the first was to overcome the local resistance. As I explained, the engineers were a bit restrictive at the beginning. Then I was able to demonstrate that they were losing money by not checking appropriately their invoices, by not getting the subsidies and all that stuff. And there was a real confusion that was a bit motivated by the suppliers to some areas, confusing the supply security risk within the energy supplier changes, all that stuff that you may know for sure. The idea is, as Dina asked, It was trying to reduce the gap in between finance, operation, and ESG. ESG is a bit the carbon. It's still a bit difficult to me to merge them because they really look at their sustainability vision without having any idea about the cost. So that's something we need to educate and keep educating them. The idea is that it turns to something that was hidden in the back office, and now it's visible on the P&L on the quarterly report. So that's something that has been a great achievement, even if it's exposed to higher questions. Next Friday, I will be forced to participate to the shareholder meetings, because now we have questions during the annual shareholder meetings onto the energy. And the vision, okay, ownership and leadership for sure. Procurement is the single point where everybody is asking. So that means that you need to be active and proactive, especially within energy crisis times. Vision, clear communication, this is what is absolutely valuable to me. I was spending hours in modifying the message depending on who I am addressing the message to. I'm stopping that for sure. One single message to all, which fits better, and it saved me time. And then I try also to, not to educate, but to explain in a simple word how things work for the renewable energies. And I was pushing hard to get the strategy being done for the 3 business sectors, as you have seen at the beginning, because otherwise, all the 3 business sectors will have demonstrate their own strategy, and they would have acted solely. So that was a real critical issue for me, and the idea was to be a bit in advance in order to manage it for them. Okay, the CFOs. So this issue is absolutely critical, and then you need to be safe within your treasury, especially. And they are not educated same way we are. They are not looking exactly at the same objectives. So there is a need for alignment, which is not always convenient to perform. But slowly and surely, we are getting better. The sales and procurement link was totally new. The first time I come to the sales, they were looking at me, but how can I help?
Who are you? What do you want?
So that was a bit in a trouble, but finally it was helpful to discover, because they face on the sales side some uncertainties also. So that's quite interesting to merge these kind of visions. And then hedging horizon. So now we have been moving from 3 to 4 years as an hedging horizon, meaning that you need to prepare your argument in advance for sure, but it's really comfortable when market liquidity allows, of course. And we have not yet started to go within the financial hedgings, because we have small volumes within the country which it could be appropriate. So the OS. So this is the world I am trying to manage. I'm not successful every day, I can tell you. But the idea is that I have already some corporate guidelines, which was mainly created based on my practices, the practices I had before 2017. So it was like a picture of the practices, and we move it into guidelines. But then those guidelines were not integrating sustainability. They were not integrating so much the P&L risk. And therefore, we have updated them last December, and then we are now getting up to the 4 years I was explaining, okay? And then what is important, especially for the forecast collection, we are making a responsibility to the sites in case they are sending a wrong forecast. That means that if we are reselling at losses, they will have to pay for those losses. So I need to accelerate. Excuse me? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You mean, do they get fired?
No. They are frightened. They are frightened to take this responsibility. Therefore, they are rather not to communicate any updates. And that's a strange politics, but it works for them. Unless I am calling the site manager in order to let him know that there is an issue there and you need to take a position. So that's something that is not natural to any. The idea is that having this centralized management helps me to reduce the time in communication, unified the message to all, And it does not necessarily cascade naturally, I can tell you. So you need to send the message to the top level, but also to the bottom, so that by chance they can get the same information normally. And this is a critical topic that you need to pay attention to, as well as for the budget. There is no two budget, there is one single Excel sheet of budget that is being the same for everybody, period. And then sustaining performance, of course, there is a missing sentence, but I have, in some countries, a lot of turnover within the teams. This is why you need to rely on a strong vision and being very well organized in order to substitute yourself to the lack of ownership that you may face in some sites.
Before we go to questions from the audience, I wanted to ask you, how will you make sure that your energy procurement strategy survives the next crisis?
I cannot. I have to be fair. No, it's a never-ending story, nor a never-ending journey, to my opinion. And what is absolutely nice is that there is always new features, a lot of innovation, but you need also to filter a lot. What does make sense for your portfolio versus what is bullshit or something that is not applicable to you. And by applying this kind of vision, you are also helping your stakeholders, because your stakeholders are lost. They are also educated by some salesmen which are visiting them, and they can certainly have a good idea, which is not so good, but you need to explain why they could be mismatching. So I will not read that, but the idea for me was just to share the journey. My journey has not been similar to yours, that's for sure. But if I have to summarize, one voice, have a strong data management first, and then try to align the C-level with the site manager and the controlling. That's.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laurent and Dina. Now, opening the floor for questions. I see one already.
Hello, can you hear me? No. Thanks a lot for this presentation, very insightful. So just curious about your journey. You mentioned 10 years journey going from just ensuring the basic supply of energy to building a strategic vision. So I'm wondering what KPIs do you look at now, like to show the added value of energy procurement? Is it just energy savings, or do you go beyond?
Yeah, no, it's a smart question. I think those KPIs are not stable because of the maturity of my organization. So at the beginning, all my reporting lines wanted to demonstrate how much do we save, which does not make sense within the energy, to my opinion, and why we had some big lacks in the forecast accuracy, for example. So we were not measuring the invoice recovery rate. We were not measuring all that stuff, the variances, and all. So now we are more focusing on this kind of technical details, on how it's like having a dashboard where you focus on the recovery rate of your invoice, unpaid or overpaid, and you look at the savings you are performing within the tenders. You look at the forecast accuracy, which is also an education to be done within the various business sectors. And I can tell you that it's not a journey that you can perform alone, and it's more within the organizational alignment that you can achieve. So one of the direct consequences was also to go to the head of the business sectors to explain that you have to develop this kind of knowledge internally. And why not to get some energy coordinators to help my life to be easier, and to get one central point of energy support by country. Otherwise, I was forced to go to each of the countries and each of the sites, and it was also a bit complicated. So I would call the KPI more as an overall efficiency, and you have to think lean as the efficiency methodology. Where are your pain points and how to solve them? What are the key stakeholders to be aligned with in order to? And I am much more focusing on that than onto the energy savings. The performance is within the budget stability because we are budget oriented. As a consequence, we try to focus more on this budget stability and accuracy. Okay. Does it answer? Okay.
Any other
Anyone else?
questions?
Yes, there's one question here.
Yeah, very simple. How big is your team?
I have an issue.
Tricky one. Curveball.
So I am alone for Europe. I have 2 colleagues located in APAC, one in Japan, another one in Shanghai, but they are dealing for their own market right now. And I have 2 colleagues based in South America, dealing for the US right now. I do remember a presentation that has been made by E&C 2 years ago, where there was a nice slide with a team made of 7, 8, 10 persons. I never get that, and I am sorry to say that maybe I will never get it.
Well, you have us, so that means that you have a whole army.
And of course, I'm not managing on the energy.
We have time for one last question, if there's anybody else in the audience.
There is one.
Congrats on the journey and on being one person show, yeah, in many aspects of this global vision, as you said. But I was wondering, what were some challenges and lessons learned with the onboarding, of the vision, of the strategy in some different parts of the world. It's markets are different, obviously. For instance, in EMEA compared to Europe, yeah. What were the challenges and lessons learned? Yeah.
It's a smart question, thank you, because to my opinion, the challenges are mainly humans. There is nothing to deal with the energy market. Energy market, you need to understand, you need to be very humble, and you need to discover, that's for sure. But you cannot get the right knowledge on each of the market. And even if we look at Europe, when you look at the diversity of the European country and the creativity of the regulations, you can be wrong all the time if you are not supported by a team, and I'm using E&C to get this kind of support. The biggest challenge is within the people, how to manage their accountability within the energy management, how to get empowered colleagues which are providing you with real support, and when you design timelines, how to succeed in fulfilling the timelines. So I would say it's more within the management challenge than I think that the main risk and the main difficulty is within this kind of organization management. And I am managing by influence, which has some limitations also. So that's, I would call that the biggest challenge I'm facing right now. Okay.
Thank you very much, Laurent and Dina. Now we'll be heading to our first round.